Welcome to One on One with Ayanthi Philip. Today we have Tarik Stafford, who joins us all the way from Sweden to tell us about life during the pandemic in Sweden. Welcome, Tarik.
Thank you, Auntie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on board with the Daily Mirror. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you. Just carrying on as usual.
Okay, so tell me, how has life been during the COVID-19 pandemic? I mean, it's everywhere, but I understand in Sweden, things have been done very differently.
Yeah, and I know it's been a major talking point for everyone in the world. Even though Sweden's kind of like a small place, it seems like it's been like a huge focal point during the whole coronavirus. For us, and to be honest, I'm not an expert on this or anything, right? It's just this is kind of like what my experience has been. At the beginning, it was kind of chilled and nothing was really happening. And eventually our office closed down, and then they kind of made soft suggestions to kind of tell people all right, look, keep yourself socially distant, make sure that you're not going out and partying or whatever.
Okay, so there's no lockdown. There's no lockdown in Sweden.
There's no lockdown. No, it's just soft recommendations, and I think it's just it's up to the people to decide what they want to do. So it's either if you really want to go out there and do your stuff and you don't care about Corona, then you can do that. Or if you're you're really anxious and you're oh, I don't want to risk it, then you can stay home and not see anyone.
Okay.
But the cool thing is that the decision is up to the people to decide what they want to do.
So how has this impacted the health of people? Are there a higher amount of deaths or lower amount of deaths? What do you think?
I think it's kind of hard to say at this point how it's, we know that there was quite a big problem with the disease spreading through, or the virus spreading through old people's homes. And Sweden kind of admitted that they kind of messed up when it came to that, because they allowed too much interaction. The nurses weren't properly trained in terms of hygiene and whatever, so the virus kind of spread really quickly through these old people homes, and as a result it kind of inflated the number of deaths in Sweden quite a lot during, especially in the earlier stages in May, June. But now it's I feel we kind of have an idea of how it works and how it spreads at least a little bit more. So it's kind of tapered off. I'm pretty sure you're aware though, we've had this massive second wave come in.
Yes.
But it's also just because we're in May we were testing maybe 20,000 people per day, I think, and now it's almost 200,000. I don't know if that's per day or per week rather, but it's the number of tests that we're kind of putting out there is way higher than what it was before.
Right.
So naturally the cases are going to be higher, but there's definitely been a resurgence of cases. So that's what we have antibody testing in Sweden, right? And so you can kind of see and a lot of people get it because they want to know, they're oh, I want to go see my grandmother for the weekend or whatever. And if you have the antibodies, you're reasonably safe to go see someone and not risk contamination.
Tell me about masks, Tarik. I understand in Sweden you also don't wear masks.
Yeah, that's probably the thing that I'm the most happy about in terms of the decisions that kind of Sweden has made. And my perspective on the whole mask thing is I'm not really sure if it's something that works. I think that's kind of why Sweden took the decision of not having masks as well, why they went with that direction, because there's no definitive evidence that in the wild that it kind of works. I think, at least for me, when I was using it in Italy, the way that people use it is they put it around their arm when they're out on the street or whatever, and then when they go into a restaurant or bar where you have to wear it, they'll put it on. And so what ends up happening is they take it on, they put it off, and blah blah blah, and it becomes this trap for germs, and it seems very unhygienic, at least. And the other thing is that you're only supposed to use them for especially the disposable ones, for I don't know, 6 hours or something, right? But people carry them around for a week. And there's no way those things are that sanitary, Sure. So I think in a vacuum, in a lab or whatever, it probably makes sense, right? Because you're covering your face and there's no germs that come out. But the way that people actually use them and the way that they're handled, I think causes it causes a lot of room for concern, at least for me.
Okay, thank you. So tell me about businesses in Sweden, like restaurants, hotels.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of businesses that have struggled during the whole pandemic. But I think it's not been as bad for, small businesses in Sweden as it has been for, small businesses in the rest of Europe, where they've had like these really strict lockdowns, and they've literally had to, fire tons of people. And because we've kind of kept everything going, we've reduced, like kind of our foot traffic and our exposure to these places, but they've been open the whole time. Like we've never shut down restaurants, we've never shut down bars. But it's not to say that, things aren't tough in Sweden for a lot of people still, because, the hospitality industry took a massive hit.
How about daycares and schools?
So daycares and schools I think they shut them down for a very, very short period of time. I'm not 100% sure. But for the most part, they kept them open. And I understand, like Anders Tegnell, who's like the leading epidemiologist in Sweden, he had a really good point, which was like, when you take kids out of school, you have higher rates of domestic violence. You have kids that kind of then become malnourished as well, because they're not fed as well at home sometimes. So keeping kids in school was like super important. Like it's super important for the household's health, super important for kids' health. So it's just like, for them, it seemed like a no-brainer, right? Like it was just like, keep kids in school. And I think this is like a really big thing about the direction and decision making and the way that people view these things about coronavirus, is people are so like just honed in on like the number of deaths. Like that's like, they're just like so fixated on that. But there's so many other things that are fundamentally important that we have to kind of, like look at when we're making these decisions. It's not as easy as just to say like, oh, let's save as many people as possible. Mm-hmm. You have to look at mental health. You have to look at the economy. Like there's so many things, like if you pull out one peg from one place, like the rest of the thing can deflate. So it's important to make sure that you kind of balance everything. You don't just like make these like rash decisions. Obviously, in the case that it was like an incredibly deadly pandemic and everyone was dying, then you kind of have to pull these like really drastic measures. But for me, I think, and I realize like the way that Sweden's kind of approached it isn't necessarily going to work for everywhere. We don't have huge population density. We don't have like political issues really. Well, we have very small ones. I guess everyone has like small political issues, but so it's a very well-oiled, I think, machine for these kinds of events. For a lot of countries, these kinds of crises become a vehicle for political change, and so people use it as leverage to create like policy change where there otherwise wouldn't be, in totally unrelated matters as well, which is crazy. So it's good to know like that in Sweden we don't have a political system that's kind of propped up to allow that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you so much, Tarik. Really good insight to what's going on in Sweden during the pandemic. Thank you for coming on board.